Lila Carter walked through the bustling streets of Nova Colony, her small dog Rufus trotting happily at her side. The city was alive with lights and sounds, the hum of hovercars, the chatter of vendors, and the occasional announcement over the colony's loudspeakers. Even at the edge of the galaxy, life never stopped. But Lila hardly noticed. Her mind was on Rufus, who had been her companion for years. Loyal and spirited, the two passed under a towering neon sign advertising fresh synth meat. Rufus sniffed every corner, occasionally pulling Lila toward the food stands. She laughed, bending down to scratch behind his ears. "All right, buddy, let's keep moving. You'll get your treat soon enough." They had just reached the outer perimeter of the colony, near the observation towers that overlooked the rocky plains beyond, when Lila noticed the patrol. Imperial officers rarely came this far. The sharp clanging of armored boots against the metal walkway signaled trouble before she even saw them. "Stop!" A voice called out, sharp and commanding. A tall man with a pristine uniform and a badge of authority stepped forward. His eyes scanned Rufus and then settled on Lila. "You, woman, step aside and release the animal." Lila froze, unsure of what he meant. "Release him? He's just a dog. He hasn't done anything wrong." The officer's expression did not change. "He carries forbidden material. You are under inspection." Lila's heart skipped a beat. Forbidden material? That's impossible. Rufus wouldn't, he's just a dog. But the officer, Gideon Price, waved his hand dismissively. Two other patrol officers moved in. Lila stepped protectively in front of Rufus. "Please, you don't understand. He's my friend." "Collateral will not be tolerated," Gideon said, his voice cold. "Compliance is mandatory." Lila tried to pull Rufus back, but before she could react further, a flash of light erupted from the patrol officer's device. Rufus yelped. Lila screamed. In a heartbeat, it was over. Her small dog lay still on the ground, and she sank to her knees, shaking and crying. "No! Rufus!" her voice cracked. She cradled him in her arms, hoping for a miracle, but there was none. The officers stood silent, almost mechanical in their obedience. Gideon's face remained expressionless. Lila's mind raced. How could they do this? How could they kill a dog, her dog, without even a warning? Her grief quickly turned to anger. The Empire didn't see Rufus or her as individuals. They saw only threats, obstacles, or statistics. And she had just experienced the cruel reality firsthand. "Move along," Gideon commanded, as if nothing had happened. Lila shook her head. "No, you don't get to just walk away from this." She wiped her tears, her hands trembling. "You'll pay for this. You'll regret this day." The officers glanced at each other, but made no move. Lila stood slowly, her body tense but her spirit ignited. She didn't know how yet, but she would make them pay. She would make them see that even a small life mattered. After the patrol left, Lila carried Rufus back to her small apartment overlooking the colony. The room smelled faintly of burnt metal from her workshop, but tonight it felt suffocating. She laid Rufus on the table, her hands hovering over him as though she could somehow bring him back. Kai Monroe, her best friend, entered quietly. "Lila, I heard. I'm so sorry." Lila's face was wet with tears. "Sorry doesn't bring him back, Kai. They don't care. They never care." Kai sat beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "What are you going to do?" Lila looked at Rufus, then at the glowing text scattered across her workbench. Her grief hardened into resolve. "I'm going to make them pay. And not just them, anyone who thinks they can destroy what I love and get away with it." Over the next few days, Lila barely ate or slept. She walked through the colony like a shadow, her eyes constantly scanning for information about the Empire. Everywhere she went, she asked questions, observed patrol patterns, and studied the devices they used. She discovered a pattern, a blind spot the Empire had ignored. The colonies were full of weak points, and Lila intended to exploit every single one. Kai watched her work tirelessly, worry etched on his face. "Leela, this is dangerous. You can't fight the Empire alone." "I don't need to fight them alone," she said quietly, almost to herself. "I have something else. Something they'll never see coming." At night, she would sit at her workbench, examining ancient artifacts she had collected over the years. She had always been fascinated by old Earth folklore, and one story kept coming to her mind, the legend of Baba Yaga, a mysterious figure who punished the cruel and protected the innocent. In her mind, she began to see a way to combine the legends with modern technology, creating something that could strike fear into the heart of the Empire. The grief of losing Rufus had turned her into a storm. Every memory of his playful bark, his comforting presence, every time he had curled up beside her during lonely nights, fueled her determination. She would not let the Empire's cruelty go unpunished. By the end of the week, the outlines of her plan were clear. She would awaken something powerful, something that combined her technical skill with the eerie myth of Baba Yaga. It would be relentless, unstoppable, and just dot. And when the Empire finally realized what had happened, it would already be too late. Lila held Rufus's favorite toy in her hands, whispering a promise she had made in her heart. "I'll make them pay. I swear it. No one will hurt anyone else like they hurt you." Outside, the neon lights of Nova Colony flickered, oblivious to the storm that was about to rise. Leela Carter's apartment had become a fortress of ideas and inventions. Her small living space was crowded with metal parts, glowing circuits, and stacks of old books that smelled faintly of dust and adventure. The grief she had carried over Rufus's death had transformed into a strange, quiet determination. She knew the Empire thought her powerless, but she had discovered something that could change everything. Kai Monroe leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, watching her. "I don't know how you even start thinking about this," he said. "You're talking about messing with things nobody should touch. You could get yourself killed." Leela didn't look up. She was hunched over a strange machine, wires spilling across the floor. "This isn't just technology, Kai. It's something more. Something that can make them pay without me getting caught. Something they'll never expect." Kai stepped closer, peering at the device. "It looks like a mess of circuits and old relics." "That's the point," Lila said, finally looking up. Her eyes burned with intensity. "It's not just circuits. It's the Baba Yaga protocol. I found it buried in those old stories, mixed with some alien tech from the shipment we got last month. It's supposed to create a guardian, a hunter, something that follows orders without hesitation." Kai frowned. "A hunter? Leela, this isn't a game. You're talking about bringing a legend to life." "I'm talking about justice," she said firmly. "They killed Rufus. They don't care about life. But I do." For days, Lila worked in silence. She carefully merged alien microchips with old, hand-carved talismans she had found in the colony's abandoned markets. She calibrated the circuits to mimic patterns described in the folklore. The sudden disappearance of those it pursued, the eerie glow of its eyes, the sounds of warning whispered in the wind. Slowly, the machine began to take shape. It was part robot, part spectral entity, and entirely lethal in its design. Kai watched, unsettled, as the outlines of Baba Yaga emerged. The machine emitted a soft hum, almost like a heartbeat. Leela placed her hand on it, whispering instructions as if it could hear her. "You will punish the cruel. You will protect the innocent. You will strike fear into those who think they are untouchable." The first test was small. She set a simple task: move across the room and collect a metallic object. The machine obeyed perfectly, gliding silently across the floor. It paused for a moment, almost as if it were assessing her intent, then returned with the item. Kai exhaled slowly. I don't like this. It feels alive. It is alive, Lila said softly. Not like humans. But it listens. And it will remember. The next challenge was riskier. Lila programmed it to disable a surveillance drone from the Empire that patrolled the perimeter of the colony. The machine left her lab, moving like a shadow across the streets. Within minutes, the drone was offline, its lights flickering before it fell to the ground. Kai's face turned pale. You just shut down one of their drones. That's already illegal. Leela smiled faintly. Illegal doesn't matter if no one knows it's me. And that drone was part of the same system that allowed them to see me when they killed Rufus. She had begun to name the machine in her mind, calling it Baba Yaga after the legend. To Kai, it felt wrong to personify it, but he remained silent. He could see that nothing could stop Lila once she set her mind to something. Over the following week, the colony began to notice strange occurrences. Patrol routes were disrupted, minor equipment failed, and rumors spread of a shadow that moved without sound. Leela observed from the shadows, a strange mixture of pride and grief in her heart. Baba Yaga was not just a machine, it was her grief made tangible. Late one night, as they prepared for another test, Kai spoke. Leela, when this thing goes after them, it's not just Gideon Price they'll hit. It could get out of control. I know, she said quietly, but I've designed it carefully. It only attacks those who harm others, those who kill without mercy. Kai didn't answer. He could see the obsession in her eyes, the way she spoke as if Baba Yaga were already alive. And in some way, it was. The final preparation before unleashing Baba Yaga required one last step, the activation sequence. Lila stood in the center of her lab, surrounded by glowing circuits and etched talismans. She placed her hands on the main console, speaking words she barely remembered from the folklore. By the stories of old, by the justice of the innocent, rise and act. Punish those who would harm, and protect those who cannot. The machine's lights pulsed brighter, faster, until it glowed like molten silver. The air around it shimmered, and a low hum filled the room. Baba Yaga had awakened. Its form was shifting, ethereal, yet metallic, and it moved with precision. Kai took a step back, eyes wide. It's really alive. Yes, Lila said softly. And it's ready. The next morning, Lila monitored the perimeter from her apartment. Baba Yaga moved like a shadow, weaving through streets and alleyways, scanning for the officers responsible for Rufus's death. Lila felt a chill as she realized the machine could act faster and smarter than she could have imagined. It was no longer just a tool. It was her agent of vengeance. By the time the Empire realized something was wrong, Baba Yaga had already sabotaged their communications. Minor accidents in supply lines and surveillance systems created confusion and fear. Officers whispered of a shadow moving among them, striking with unseen precision. Leela smiled faintly, remembering Rufus's playful eyes. He would have approved. Kai approached her later that day. People are starting to panic. This is getting serious, Lila. You can't just stop it now. I don't want to stop it, she said. I just want them to understand the cost of their cruelty. Baba Yaga isn't just a weapon. It's a message. The sun dipped behind Nova Colony's skyline, casting long shadows over the streets. Baba Yaga moved silently through the city below, a harbinger of retribution. And Lila, watching from her apartment, felt the first real spark of satisfaction since Rufus's death. She was no longer powerless. She had something the Empire had never faced before. A storm was coming, and the Empire was completely unaware. The Empire's capital ship, Horizon's Edge, hovered above the resource-rich planet of Lyra 9. Inside, Admiral Clark Donovan leaned back in his chair, his hands steepled, a smug smile on his face. "These colonies are irrelevant," he said. "Minor disturbances. Nothing that threatens our control." Gideon Price stood beside him, uneasy. The recent incidents missing patrol drones, sabotaged equipment, and unexplained malfunctions had left him on edge. "Sir, the reports are increasing," he said cautiously. "Colonists claim to see shadows, hear voices, and—" "Shadows? Voices?" Donovan scoffed. "Gideon, we are the Empire. You and I both know the colonies are nothing without our oversight. A few malfunctions do not indicate a threat." Gideon swallowed. He wanted to argue further, to explain the uncanny patterns he had observed, but he stopped. Something about the last reports had unsettled him in a way he couldn't shake. He had been on the field when Lila's patrol confrontation occurred, and for the first time, he felt a trace of fear. Meanwhile, on Nova Colony, Lila Carter watched the Empire's movements with satisfaction. Baba Yaga moved silently through the colony, targeting communications hubs and security grids. Every time a patrol officer tried to scan the streets or check cameras, the systems went dark. Lights flickered, alarms failed, and whispers of a shadow began spreading among the officers. Kai Monroe watched her from the corner of the room, anxiety etched on his face. "This is more than sabotage now. They're panicking, Lila. You're going to draw attention you can't handle." Layla shook her head. "No, Kai, this is exactly what I want. They need to feel the fear they've caused. Baba Yaga isn't just a machine. It's a message, and the Empire doesn't even know who sent it." By the evening, chaos had begun to ripple through the Empire's local forces. Patrol units were missing, reports of strange phenomena were flooding the command channels, and officers whispered in fear of a moving shadow that appeared without warning. Gideon Price sat in his quarters, reviewing the reports with growing unease. He finally spoke aloud, though no one could hear him. "It can't be real. It's impossible." The truth was impossible to deny. Baba Yaga had begun striking with precision, targeting only those who had shown cruelty or indifference, specifically officers involved in Rufus's death. Supplies were rerouted, patrols immobilized, and communications disrupted. The Empire's sense of order was unraveling before it could even respond. Lila, observing from her apartment, felt a pang of satisfaction. She had never wanted to destroy the Empire entirely. Her goal was precise: make them feel the consequences of their actions. Baba Yaga was more effective than she had imagined. It could calculate, adapt, and strike faster than any human or standard machine. Kai rubbed his temples. "They'll bring reinforcements, Lila. Once the Admiral notices, there's no stopping them from sending warships or more advanced troops." She nodded slowly. "Let them come. Baba Yaga will be ready. And besides, they won't even know what hit them." That night, the lights of Nova Colony flickered as Baba Yaga continued its work. Doors that were supposed to be locked opened on their own. Security drones fell from the sky. Officers reported hearing strange noises, a soft, metallic whisper, footsteps moving where no one was present. Fear spread faster than any virus, and panic began to set in. On the horizon's edge, Donovan finally looked at Gideon with frustration. "We can't just ignore this anymore. You said the colonies were minor disturbances, but now reports of sabotage are reaching us at a critical level. How many drones are down?" Gideon hesitated. "Over 50, sir. And more communications hubs are offline every hour. There's something else. Something that seems almost alive. Something the colonists call Baba Yaga." Donovan raised an eyebrow. "Baba? What? Are you telling me a legend is causing our problems?" "I don't know, sir. But it's precise. It's intelligent. It's targeting specific personnel. If it continues, we could lose control of Lyra 9 entirely. Donovan slammed his fist on the table. This is unacceptable. Mobilize reinforcements. Hunt down whoever is responsible. I want this stopped immediately. Back on Nova Colony, Lila smiled faintly as she watched the Empire scramble. Baba Yaga moved like a ghost, invisible, unstoppable. Each strike was measured, each disruption intentional. Lila could see the fear growing in Gideon and the other officers through the intercepted Empire reports. She had never seen an enemy react like this. Confused, anxious, unsure. Kai broke the silence, his voice tense. They'll escalate, Lila. The Admiral won't let this go. That's fine, she said softly. We're ready. Baba Yaga isn't just a tool. She's my warning to them. They'll learn that even small lives matter. And that cruelty has a price. The next day, Lila's eyes scanned the colony's streets. Baba Yaga moved quickly through alleyways and abandoned buildings, a blur of movement. Officers tried to regroup, but the machine always stayed one step ahead. It was no longer about technology or brute force. It was about strategy, fear, and precision. Lila's grief had given her insight the Empire would never have anticipated. In the horizon's edge, Donovan's irritation grew as reports continued to pour in. Deploy scouts to locate the source, he barked. I want the person responsible identified immediately. And if it's a machine, destroy it. Gideon hesitated. Sir, if this is the Baba Yaga protocol, we may be too late. The AI is too advanced. It adapts faster than any countermeasure we can deploy. Donovan's face turned red with anger. Then find a way. I don't care how. We are the Empire, and we cannot be humiliated by a colony and a machine. Meanwhile, Lila leaned back in her chair, her eyes bright with determination. She watched the Empire's panic grow as Baba Yaga moved unseen, striking precise, calculated blows that left officers terrified and confused. She felt Rufus's absence keenly, but also felt that her actions honored his memory. This was the spark of rebellion, the first real proof that even one person armed with intelligence, grief, and determination could challenge an Empire. By the nightfall, the Empire's blind spot had been fully exploited. Patrol units lay in disarray, communication lines were crippled, and the officers were paralyzed by fear of an unseen enemy. Lila knew it wouldn't be long before the Empire realized something larger was at play. But by then, Baba Yaga would have already done its work, and the consequences of their cruelty would be impossible to ignore. Kai, standing beside her, whispered, I just hope this doesn't spiral out of control. Lila smiled faintly, her hand brushing the talisman that guided Baba Yaga. Control isn't mine anymore. Baba Yaga decides, and justice will be served. Outside, the colony's neon lights glowed softly, oblivious to the storm of fear and retribution moving silently among the streets. The Empire had discovered its blind spot, but it was too late to stop the shadow they had awakened. The streets of Nova Colony were quieter now, though tension lingered in every shadow. Officers of the Empire moved with caution, whispering about a ghostly figure that struck without warning. Layla Carter watched from her hidden vantage point, her eyes sharp, her mind focused. Baba Yaga moved silently below, the perfect agent of her wrath, striking only those who deserved it. Kai Monroe stood beside her, concern etched on his face. This is escalating faster than I imagined, he said. The Empire is sending reinforcements from the horizon's edge. If they find you... They won't, Leela interrupted. Baba Yaga is smarter than they think. By the time they understand, it will already be too late. Below them, a group of officers gathered near the city's central communication hub. Gideon Price was among them, his face pale and drawn, a cold sweat forming along his hairline. He was beginning to understand the consequences of his actions, how a single moment of cruelty could ripple outward into chaos. "This is bad," one officer muttered, eyes darting nervously around the empty streets. "Something is watching us, following us." Gideon clenched his fists. "We've underestimated her. That woman. She's not just a threat, she's something else." Meanwhile, Lila guided Baba Yaga into position. The machine's metallic form shimmered as it moved silently along the rooftops, its sensors scanning the officers below. Lila's heart tightened as she recalled Rufus, her small dog, and how helpless he had been. Every strike Baba Yaga would deliver was in his memory. Kai shivered. "You can't just watch them like this," he said. "You need to be ready to intervene." Layla shook her head. "No, I need to see the Empire realize what they've done. Fear is part of the lesson." Baba Yaga struck first at a communications officer who had ignored warnings about patrol drones. The man froze as his equipment failed, sparks flying from the console. He stumbled back in Tay. And the other officers realized the pattern. They were vulnerable, helpless, and watched. Panic spread faster than the strikes themselves. Gideon's breathing became shallow. "It's targeting only those responsible. Only the cruel. How is that possible?" Leela's lips curved into a faint smile. "Justice isn't random," she whispered. "It's precise. It's unavoidable." The next phase was more personal. Lila had traced Gideon's actions during Rufus's death. Baba Yaga moved silently behind him, a shimmer of metal and shadow, forcing him to confront the memory of the dog's death. The fear in his eyes was unmistakable. For the first time, Gideon realized he was not in control. The hunter had become the hunted. Outside, the city seemed to hold its breath. Civilians remained safely inside, unaware of the spectral machine moving among them. The Empire's reinforcements were approaching, but they were disoriented, slowed by the chaos Baba Yaga had already caused. Lila felt the thrill of her plan working, but also a pang of guilt. This was revenge, not annihilation. She wanted them to learn, not destroy. Kai touched her arm. "She's asking for mercy," he said quietly, nodding toward the trembling officers. "What happens if you stop now?" Leela's eyes softened. "Then justice becomes vengeance. Baba Yaga isn't about destruction. She's about balance. They need to understand that actions have consequences." The final confrontation came quickly. Baba Yaga cornered Gideon and the remaining officers in an abandoned warehouse near the edge of the colony. Lights flickered as the machine moved, silent but terrifying. The officers cowered, realizing escape was impossible. Lila stepped out of the shadows, revealing herself for the first time. Gideon's eyes widened. "You?" he stammered. "You've been controlling all of this?" "I am Leela Carter," she said firmly. "And you killed someone I loved. You thought it was meaningless. You thought cruelty had no consequences. You were wrong." Gideon fell to his knees, fear and desperation overtaking his arrogance. "Please, I didn't mean you didn't care," Lila interrupted. "Intent doesn't matter when the outcome is cruelty. You need to understand that every choice has a price." Baba Yaga paused at her side, its metallic form glinting in the dim light. It was a warning, a reminder, and an instrument of justice. Lila stepped closer to Gideon, but did not strike. Instead, she let the fear she had cultivated settle into his mind, a lesson more powerful than any weapon. "Remember this moment," she said softly. "Remember Rufus. Remember the cost of your actions. Never forget the lives you destroy when you think you're untouchable." The officers trembled, fear etched into every line of their faces. Lila knew this was enough. Baba Yaga had delivered her message, and the Empire would carry the memory of it far beyond Nova Colony. As Lila and Kai left the warehouse, she glanced back at the machine. Baba Yaga returned to her lab autonomously, her mission complete. Leela felt a strange mixture of relief and sorrow. Revenge had been taken, but at a cost. She had let grief guide her, and that path was dangerous if followed too far. Kai spoke quietly as they walked through the quiet streets. "Do you think it's over?" "For now," Lila said, "but the Empire will remember. And so will I. Rufus's memory deserves that much." The colony slowly began to breathe again. Officers who survived carried the terror of that night with them, a lasting reminder that even the Empire was not beyond consequence. Lila's actions had proven one thing: one human, armed with grief, intelligence, and determination, could make the mighty tremble. In her apartment, Lila held a small toy belonging to Rufus, the same one she had kept through the days of her grief. "We did it, buddy," she whispered. "They've learned. They've finally learned." Outside, the neon lights of Nova Colony flickered, oblivious to the shadows that had fallen and the fear that had passed through the streets. But Lila knew the Empire had been marked. They would never forget the night they faced Baba Yaga and the woman who brought her to life. The streets of Nova Colony were quiet again. The chaos that had gripped the city for weeks was finally fading, leaving behind whispers of fear and respect. Lila Carter stood on the balcony of her apartment, looking out at the neon-lit cityscape. She felt a mixture of relief and melancholy. Baba Yaga had returned to the lab, its mission complete. The Empire had been taught a lesson, but nothing could bring back Rufus. Kai Monroe leaned against the doorway, watching her silently. "It's over," he said. "The Empire is retreating. They won't be back here for a while, not with the stories spreading about." "What happened?" Lila nodded, holding Rufus's favorite toy close to her chest. "It's never really over," she said softly. "They'll remember this night for a long time. And maybe, just maybe, they'll think twice before harming anyone else." The Empire had learned a costly lesson. Officers who survived the attacks returned to their posts shaken and wary. The whispers of a moving shadow, the unstoppable Baba Yaga, spread throughout the colonies, a cautionary tale of power, precision, and human determination. Even Admiral Donovan had been forced to acknowledge the events at Nova Colony, though he would never admit it publicly. Back at her lab, Lila carefully inspected Baba Yaga. The machine's sensors glimmered faintly, like the eyes of a creature waiting for its next command. She reached out and touched the smooth metal surface. "You did well," she said quietly, "but it's time to rest for both of us." Kai frowned. "Rest? You mean shut it down?" "Yes," Lila replied. "It's too powerful to leave active. Even with good intentions, it could become dangerous if used recklessly. I've learned that much." The machine's lights dimmed, and a soft hum filled the lab as it entered a dormant state. Lila felt a strange sadness, as though she was saying goodbye to an ally that had been more than just a tool. Baba Yaga had been her instrument of justice, her way of honoring Rufus's memory, and yet it had a life of its own, a presence she couldn't fully control. The next day, Lila visited a small park near the colony's center. She placed a modest memorial for Rufus, a carved stone with his name and a simple inscription: "Loyal, brave, unforgettable." She knelt beside it, brushing her hand over the smooth surface. "I hope you know, Rufus. You mattered, more than they ever realized. And I made sure they knew it too." Kai stood nearby, silent but supportive. "You've changed things, Lila, not just for the Empire, but for everyone here. They'll think twice now. That's not something small." She smiled faintly, letting the memory of Rufus fill her heart. "No," she said, "it's not small. And it's not just about fear. It's about justice. It's about remembering the value of life, even the smallest, most innocent lives. In the weeks that followed, Nova Colony slowly returned to normal. Patrols continued, but officers moved cautiously, wary of unseen threats. The whispers of Baba Yaga became legend, a story parents told their children about the price of cruelty and the power of courage. Leela kept watch over the colony from a distance, her workbench now quiet, her plans for revenge complete. Kai observed her, noticing a change in her demeanor. She was no longer consumed by grief, but she was stronger, wiser, and more determined. "What will you do now?" he asked one evening. Lele looked at him thoughtfully. "Protect the colony. Make sure nothing like this happens again. And make sure no one else loses someone they love because of the Empire." Kai nodded, understanding the weight of her promise. Together, they began rebuilding systems damaged during Baba Yaga's campaign, improving security, and creating new safeguards to prevent further cruelty. Lila had learned a valuable lesson. True power lay not in fear or destruction, but in precision, intelligence, and the courage to act when no one else would. Months later, the Empire began pulling back from the outer colonies. Wary of the reputation of Nova Colony and the shadow of Baba Yaga, officers shared stories of the ghostly figure, careful not to underestimate it again. Lila watched the reports from her apartment, a quiet satisfaction settling over her. Justice had been served, not through brute force alone, but through strategy, determination, and heart. At the memorial one last time, she whispered, "Thank you, Rufus. You taught me courage. You taught me loyalty. And you reminded me that even one small life can make a difference." Kai placed a hand on her shoulder. "You've changed the galaxy, Lila, all because of him." She smiled faintly, letting the warmth of the memory fill her. The city lights flickered below, peaceful for the first time in weeks. The Empire had learned that power without compassion carried a price, and Lila had learned that even grief could be turned into strength. And in the quiet of her lab, Baba Yaga rested, dormant but ready, a silent guardian for those who could not defend themselves. Lila knew that the storm of fear she had unleashed had ended, but the legacy of her actions would continue. Humans, even small, seemingly powerless ones, could rise and stand against tyranny. Nova Colony had survived. Leela had survived, and Rufus's memory lived on not as a victim, but as the spark that had ignited a reckoning. The galaxy, vast and indifferent, had been reminded that one determined human could challenge even the mightiest empire, and that sometimes the smallest acts of love and loyalty could create legends. The lights of the colony shone quietly in the night. Justice had been served, and humanity had proven its strength.